Welcome to the program. I'm Jeff Schechtman. Back in 2002, in the wake of the George W. Bush election, political demographer Rui Teixeira, along with journalist John Judas, wrote The Emerging Democratic Majority. It spoke of the changing demographics of America, of ethnic diversity, and how it was destined to shape forever Democratic success in the 21st century. That success has not quite worked out as planned. It turns out that the feature, not the bug, was the way our Constitution was written. Rural voters matter. Books like Hillbilly Elegy, What's the Matter with Kansas, and Kevin Phillips' Emerging Republican Majority painted a different picture than Teixeira and Judas, one where rural voters would succumb to the seduction of populism, culture wars, and the power of the evangelical right. Enter Donald Trump and the collection of populist crazies. But is this a permanent condition? Is this divide the real 21st century political future? My guest, Maine State Senator Chole Maxman, and her campaign manager, Canyon Woodard, think that there's another way forward for the Democrats. They dealt with it in Chloe's campaign and in their new book, Dirt Road Revival. Chole Maxman, at 29, is the youngest woman ever to serve in the Maine State Senate. She was elected in 2020 after unseating a two-term Republican incumbent and the former state Senate Majority Leader. In 2018, she served in the Maine House of Representatives after becoming the first Democrat to win a rural conservative district. Canyon Woodard was born and raised and homeschooled in the Appalachian Mountains of rural North Carolina and was the campaign manager for Chole Maxman's successful 2018 and 2020 campaigns. He earned an honors degree from Harvard, where he was an active organizer to get Harvard to divest from fossil fuels. Together, they're the authors of Dirt Road Revival, How to Rebuild Rural Politics and Why Our Future Depends on It. Chole, Canyon, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. Chole, I want to start with you and a little bit about why you wanted to jump into politics. Is it something you always thought about, something you had planned? And if not, what is it that was the turning point?
That's such a good question. It was definitely not something that I had ever thought about growing up, and I started to think about it after I graduated college, but I thought it was something that I would do in my 30s or 40s because I literally thought that I needed graduate degrees and have a stable home with a spouse and children in order to run for office, just because that's what I had seen as the model. But Canyon and I have been talking a lot about, what does progressive organizing look like in rural communities and how could we bring it back to our hometown? So in 2018, we just decided to take the plunge. We were both 25 at the time. And, I think there's like a lot of factors that went into deciding to do it at that moment. Watching Donald Trump get elected with the rural vote in large part, and also watching state legislatures swing to the right, also because of the rural vote. It felt like I had a duty to go back to my hometown and my home house district, which did vote for Trump in 2016, and really kind of understand what was happening.
And stay with that for a moment. The idea of going back to your hometown, going back to this small rural community where you grew up. So many young people today, after they finish college, want to get away from that. They want to go to the city or somewhere else. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's definitely, I've just always loved where I'm from. Even during college, I came home every long weekend, every vacation. I just love it here. I moved back the day after I graduated from college. But I definitely have so many peers who did leave, and a lot of folks who don't want to come back, because there's not a lot of folks here. It's a different way of life. There's not a lot of young people. And also I think, a lot of young folks who are, have different identities don't always feel safe coming back to some of the rural conservative places. And, but I just really love where I'm from, and I wanted to understand what was happening to my community, because the divisiveness that we see today is not how I was raised.
And Canyon, talk about your interest. You grew up in a rural environment in North Carolina. Talk about why you didn't want to escape that and why it was so interesting to you.
Yeah, I think for a long time I did imagine escaping it, and it wasn't till several years into college at least, and living in the city when country music started sounding like home and nostalgic instead of something that I immediately wanted to turn off. And I felt a really strong pull back to the mountains and the rivers and the creeks and the family and just the slower pace of life here.
Canyon, Chloe's campaign and how you envisioned it. Why did you think that in a rural conservative district, somebody like Chloe had a chance of winning?
Gosh, and I mean, in 2018, I wasn't completely sure that she did have a real shot. She was running in a district that, had a 16-point Republican advantage, which is a huge advantage to overcome. But I think approached it with a lot of curiosity of, it was early 2018, Trump's election was still super recent memory. And it was kind of like, why not give it a try and just see what we can do, see what can happen. And, she was 25 years old at the time, running in one of the most rural districts in the state and mostly in what was the oldest county in the state by age. So it was like, can this 25-year-old, climate activist appeal to anyone here? And yeah, it turned out that she really could.
Chloe, did you think you had a chance to win, or were you doing it because it was something you believed in and felt that this was something you had kind of an obligation to do?
I mean, I certainly hoped that we would win, but I think in campaigning, it's as much about the journey as the outcome. And so it really felt like the right thing to do. And the farther that we got into the campaign and the experience and talking with all of these folks who had never been contacted by Democrats before, it felt like conversation by conversation, we were actually making a difference and learning a lot about what's happening in our country. So it felt worth it during the moment, even though it was extremely hard to tell if we would make it or not.
What were you most afraid of as you went out there to campaign?
I mean, I think the honest truth is I was afraid something would happen to me alone when I'm canvassing out in the woods by myself. But, I definitely had some experiences that did not feel super comfortable, but, thank God I was safe, and I definitely present with a lot of privilege and, but that was always on my mind is like, what can happen? But I also, my community is a very beautiful place, and its safety rung true.
And as you mentioned before, or I think Canyon mentioned, you talked to people that really had not talked to Democrats before. Talk a little bit about what some of those confrontations were like, or what started out as confrontations.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing a voice memo back in 2018, and I said something like, man, Democrat is a bad word around here. When you show up at someone's door, they often ask, are you a Democrat or a Republican? And I always answered, I'm a Democrat. I think, especially at the national level, that the Democrats have developed a reputation in rural places that is just really hard to overcome. And there are so many candidates like me and so many local organizations working on the ground to elect progressive folks to office. And we have to kind of overcome that national narrative. But I think once you can kind of push back those preconceived notions of what a Democrat may be, or in myself, I can push back against what my vision of what a Republican may be, there's actually so much fertile common ground that we can really build a relationship from.
I want to ask both of you this. Chloe, start with you. How much of your success and your ability to talk to these people and your ability to bring many of them around to vote for you came from not politics or ideology or issues necessarily, but the sheer force of your personality out there?
Oh my. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how strong my personality is, but I think I've always been kind of extremely empathetic and very quiet, and I think those qualities allowed me to really listen to people talk a lot, and through that listening, really understand where they were coming from in a way that I wasn't expecting. But I think it wasn't just about me. It was all of our volunteers too, and how just kind and genuine our campaign was, so that whenever someone got a phone call or a door knock or a postcard from someone involved with our movement, it was just really genuine and nice.
And Canyon, how much was it issues, and how much was Chole?
I mean, to me, what stands out is the authenticity, and that folks really saw a real community-rooted campaign and candidate. You know, I think we have a huge problem in the Democratic Party of hiring the same kind of consultants year after year, and they create the same looking campaigns year after year that don't really connect to folks. It just feels really fake. It feels packaged, and so we set out from the get-go to do something different. We turned down the party consultants, and we painted our campaign signs by hand, and we made all of our mailers ourselves, and we went against everyone's advice and stuck to 100% positive campaign, and really just focused on building a grassroots campaign that was powered by tons and tons of volunteers going door to door and talking to people.
Talk about the pushback you got from establishment Democrats in Maine.
There was a lot. Folks were not pleased that that we weren't using the consultants. So there was a good bit of pushback in that regard, and then I think by and large folks came together to collaborate once we got past the initial attention of them realizing that we were going to do things a little bit differently. And we did our best to communicate super proactively and openly, and I think they did their best to go with the flow and support something that felt very different.
Chole, talk a little bit about what you told some of these voters, particularly Republican voters that really had not even talked to Democrats or Democratic political candidates ever before. How did you approach them? What did you tell them? How did you make that contact?
I think when we open a door and there's a canvasser outside, or when you're the canvasser, I think for the most part, we all expect a pretty standard script that has some basic questions like, do you know where your polling place is? Who are you supporting this election, et cetera, et cetera. And they're just very targeted questions aimed at extracting information from the voter. And what we did was a little bit different. We just really wanted to hear where people were at. So the start of the conversation was, hey, I'm Chole. I'm running for state rep. I just stopped by to hear what was on your mind today. And just having really open-ended conversations without really any specific agenda except to try and connect. And those are the same skills that our volunteers use as well. We didn't know it at the time, but now people call it deep canvassing, having actual genuine conversations with people. And when you do that, you do find that you have a lot in common, even if it's something as simple as, wow, we both really love our community here and we both want to fight for it, even if we're fighting for it in different ways. That's a huge thing to build a relationship off of, but you can't find that common ground if you're really have the pressure on you to read the script and identify if a voter will support a candidate or not.
How does something like this, in your view, Chole, start with you, how does something like this scale? Because certainly there are places where there just isn't the ability to do all those doors that you knocked on.
It's so true, and it's something that both of us are really aware of. One of the reasons why we ran for the Senate district, definitely not the only reason, was to scale up some of the stuff that we use in our House campaign. But Maine does have small legislative districts. We definitely don't profess to have all the answers, and what works here may not work in other states, and some of the things will work in other states. And of course, a statewide campaign or districts with 100,000 people in them are going to look really different from what our race looked like. And so we definitely acknowledge all that. What we tried to do as we wrote the book and went through this is to really kind of put it in the perspective of all the campaigns that both of us have worked on and extract some lessons that could hopefully be resonant, if not applicable in other circumstances. And I think the biggest one, and we hear this from folks all across the country, is just really taking time to listen, really taking time to listen and to connect with folks and just really build robust volunteer movements that can help have those conversations. It's the kind of investment that we need more of in rural communities.
Canyon, talk a little bit about authenticity. It was certainly part of what you did in the campaign. And as you say, you created all your own materials, and Chole talked to people one-on-one. Talk about the importance of that authenticity and how something like that might be able to be scaled.
I think authenticity was huge. I think folks prided themselves on being good judges of character. And when they see campaigns or candidates that look exactly like something else that they've seen before, saying, using the same talking points on healthcare and education and kind of regurgitating these politically triangulated lines that are so transparently just coming from consultants and polling, it really, really turns people off, both to the candidate and more broadly the political process. And so I think just leaning into personal stories and leading with values is something that everyone can benefit from across the country.
Canyon, do you think that it was issues or really the nature of the campaign itself, the authenticity that you're talking about, and Chole, that's what really put it over the top more than any issue or ideology or program?
I think it was such a huge part of it, again, I don't think it was just us. I think it was everyone who worked on our campaign, just bringing like a really different spirit. I mean, it really felt different than any other political experience that I've ever had. And I think the folks that we talked to felt that as well. I think it's just, when you got a stranger knocking on your door, and especially when they're a politician, I think we're all kind of primed to think the worst. And it just seems that we have to put more care and empathy into how we show up, because those bonds of trust between citizen and democracy have all but broken. And I think the only way we can rebuild it is with these face-to-face conversations, and that just requires showing up with love.
How were the two campaigns different, Chole?
They felt different in a lot of ways and similar in some. The Senate district is quite a bit larger than the House district, about 38,000 people compared to almost 9,000. So quite a bit larger. The Senate district is also more moderate than our House district. So while we had a lot more folks to talk to, it wasn't leaning quite as hard to the right. But I think because of that, we just had so many incredible conversations that actually did end up echoing the same themes of folks feeling really left behind and unheard by their government. In 2020 as well, both of us, like every other person on the planet, went through adapting to a pandemic world, and that really impacted our campaign and what it looked like. And we just wanted to make sure that we were helping our community and making sure that our volunteers felt safe at the same time.
Did you have a difference, or did people respond to, want to know what you had done in the legislature when you were running for the Senate? Was there the sense of being, even though you weren't an incumbent for that position, you had a record at that point?
Yeah, it was definitely something that I talked about a lot, and I carried the same principles into my service in the Senate. But when I was elected in 2018, I sponsored 4 bills, and they all came directly from conversations that I had with constituents and experiences that they had or dreams or needs that they had. And that's certainly something that kept resonating with folks and that I talked about a lot in 2020. So, it was definitely important. And every month, basically every month since I was elected in 2018, I've hosted Coffee with Chole, and so people just kind of see me around and know that I'm available.
Canyon, talk a bit about your desire to do this with other candidates and really shape the experience that you had in these campaigns to electing others.
Yeah, I think it's so important, especially to get young folks like us to think about moving back to their communities and investing in politics in this way, and to get folks young and old more invested in the political process again. I think that we face some kind of dark and at times hopeless feeling times, and I think that the best way to get through that is through taking action. And working on these campaigns has been the biggest source of hope in my life, and I think our message to Democrats all across the country is, rural America is not a lost cause. We can run and win in these rural districts, and we need to invest in that.
And is it your plan, Canyon, to keep working on campaigns?
Chloe and I just started a 501c4 nonprofit called Dirt Road Organizing. So we're pivoting a lot of our energy towards supporting the volunteer infrastructures that could be used in campaigning for candidates or for issues in their communities, and we've started to do a lot of trainings on the kind of canvassing and community organizing approaches that worked for us both in Maine and also offering those trainings to folks in communities across the country. So that's what we're pouring a lot of our energy into now.
And Chloe, what's ahead for you?
Like Canyon said, we're just really excited to dig into more rural organizing work and support other folks running who are progressives in rural conservative places. I think there's just so much meaning in that. And I also am going to law school here in Maine next year to really further my understanding of policymaking.
And obviously you want to stay involved in politics?
I do. I think everything that we love and care about really circles back to our political system, and more importantly, the people that we have in office. And I think we need really strong movements on the ground that are organizing year in and year out, not just on election day, to both get good people elected and then also to hold the system accountable after those folks are elected. We need it all, and we need it now more than ever.
And before I let you go, Chloe, talk about how you see other young people responding to this, how they've responded to you, to your campaign, and how some of them have put aside some of the cynicism that we see among young people today about politics.
Yeah, I think, when you ask that question, all these images come to my mind of our friends from high school and college and just life who drove up to Noblesboro, Maine to volunteer with us and canvass with us. Some of them, it was their first political experience. I think it's just really important that we see all different folks from all different identities running for office and really engaging with the political process. I think we definitely need more young people. We need more women. We need more queer folks. We need more folks of color, because that's how we have a representative democracy that can actually fight for all the things that we so desperately need right now. And I think it's going to require some investment in the Democratic Party, but if we can just start getting our friends and our networks involved with this process and showing that there is a way to do it that isn't totally mind-numbing and depressing, then, maybe cycle by cycle we'll start to move the needle forward.
Maine State Senator Chole Maxman, Canyon Woodard, I thank you both so much for spending time with us. The book is Dirt Road Revival, How to Rebuild Rural Politics and Why Our Future Depends on It. Chloe, Canyon, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jeff. Really enjoyed the chat.
Thank you.